Montana Territory, 1873. The unforgiving winter winds howled across the plains, but inside the Coyote Creek trading post, a different kind of storm was brewing. 18-year-old Marianne Kincaid stood rigid as stone, her delicate hands trembling as she stared at her father. Behind him loomed Bartholomew Grissom, a cattle baron with more years on him than the territory itself, his weathered face creased with a smile that never reached his cold eyes. "It is decided, Marianne. You will marry Mr. Grissom come spring," her father announced, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. Marianne's deep blue eyes, so often compared to Montana's summer sky, filled with unshed tears. Her chestnut hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, framing a face that held the kind of beauty that made cowboys forget their own names. But in this moment, that beauty felt like a curse. "Father, please," she whispered. "He is older than you by a decade at least." Marianne believed with every fiber of her being that women like her had only two paths in the West: submission or destitution. The frontier demanded sacrifice, and for a young woman whose family ranch was drowning in debt, that sacrifice was her future. Her father had gambled away their security, and now she was the last chip on the table. "Your father owes me considerable money, girl," Grissom drawled, eyeing her like a prized mare. "This arrangement settles his debts and ensures you a comfortable life." Most would consider that generosity. Marianne knew what she wanted: freedom from this arrangement. But what she needed, what her soul craved, was the belief that she deserved more than being bartered away. That even in this harsh territory, love could find root and grow. 2 weeks later, as February snow blanketed the valley, Marianne stood in the general store, clutching her meager list of supplies. The door swung open, bringing with it a blast of cold air and a stranger who would unknowingly change the course of her life. Isaac Powell removed his hat, revealing sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of aged whiskey. At 26, his face bore the weathering of outdoor life, but lacked the hardness so common to men of the frontier. His lean frame suggested strength earned through honest work rather than barroom brawls. "Pardon me, miss," he said, voice warm despite the chill. "Might you know where I could find the land office?" Marianne pointed him toward the courthouse, their fingers accidentally brushing as she handed back his dropped glove. That fleeting touch, innocent as morning dew, sparked something neither expected. "Thank you kindly," he said with a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Isaac had come to Montana convinced that a man must stand alone to survive. After losing his parents to fever and his brother to a Sioux raid, he believed connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death on the frontier. He had purchased land sight unseen and arrived to build a life of isolation, where no one could be taken from him again. What he hadn't counted on was meeting a woman whose eyes held the same loneliness he carried within himself. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed with increasing frequency. Isaac discovered that Marianne had a quick mind for figures and helped her father with the ranch books. She learned that Isaac had been a schoolteacher back east before frontier dreams called him west. Each interaction chipped away at their protective shells. One afternoon in early March, Marianne was struggling with a restless horse outside the mercantile when Isaac appeared. "May I?" he asked, approaching slowly. She nodded, watching as he soothed the animal with gentle words and a confident hand. The simplicity of his kindness, expecting nothing in return, stood in stark contrast to Grissom's possessive declarations of protection. "You have a way with them," she observed. "Animals know when you respect them," Isaac replied. "People too." Their conversation flowed like a clear mountain stream, until the town church bell reminded Marianne of the time. She paled visibly. "I must go. Mr. Grissom expects me for dinner with his business associates." Isaac's expression changed subtly at the name. "Bartholomew Grissom? The cattle baron?" "My future husband," Marianne said, the words tasting like ash. The revelation hit Isaac like a physical blow. "I see. When is the wedding?" 6 weeks from now. A business arrangement to settle my father's debts." The naked vulnerability in her admission challenged Isaac's belief that emotional distance was the only safe path. Before he could respond, she had gathered her reins and departed, leaving him with questions that would keep him awake through the night. As March progressed toward April, Isaac and Marianne found themselves drawn together despite propriety's demands. They met seemingly by chance, at the creek where Marianne gathered wildflowers, on the trail where Isaac hauled lumber for his cabin. Each encounter revealed another layer of connection, another reason their hearts recognized something in each other. "You deserve better than being traded to settle a debt," Isaac told her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. "What choice do I have?" she asked. "My father will lose everything. We will have nowhere to go." "There are always choices," he countered. "Sometimes we just cannot see them through our fear." His words lodged in her heart, challenging her resignation. Meanwhile, Grissom grew increasingly possessive, restricting her movements and questioning her absences. The town whispered about the May-December arrangement, some pitying Marianne, others envying her security. One stormy afternoon, Marianne sought shelter in the livery stable when the skies opened unexpectedly. She found Isaac there, repairing a wagon wheel. "This weather will pass quickly," he offered, continuing his work to ease her discomfort at their unexpected privacy. "Like youth," she said bitterly. "Mr. Grissom reminds me frequently how fleeting my beauty will be, how fortunate I am that he values me while I am still fresh." Isaac set down his tools, anger flashing across his features. Men who speak that way do not see women as equals, but as possessions to be used and discarded. "And how do you see women, Mr. Powell?" she challenged. "As human beings with dreams and desires of their own," he answered without hesitation. "As partners rather than property." The earnestness in his voice cracked something inside her. For the first time since her engagement, Marianne wept openly, the sobs wrenched from deep within. Isaac hesitated only briefly before offering his handkerchief, careful not to overstep. "I am building a home," he said quietly when her tears subsided. "Nothing grand, but solid, with good water and fertile soil." The implications hung between them, dangerous and tempting. As April bloomed, so did their forbidden connection. They exchanged books, ideas, and dreams in brief, stolen moments. Isaac shared his vision for his land, orchards and gardens alongside his cattle. Marianne revealed her love of poetry and her secret desire to see the ocean someday. Meanwhile, wedding preparations accelerated. Grissom imported an expensive dress from Denver, parading Marianne before the town as evidence of his wealth and influence. Her father drank more heavily, avoiding his daughter's accusing eyes. The turning point came when Grissom struck Marianne after finding her reading a book Isaac had lent her. The blow left a bruise on her cheek that no amount of powder could fully conceal. When Isaac saw the mark the next day, something fundamental shifted in him. The man who believed isolation was safety suddenly understood that some risks were worth taking, that some connections were worth fighting for. "He did this to you," Isaac stated, not a question but a certainty. "It will not happen again," Marianne insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "You are right about that," Isaac replied, a new resolve hardening his features. "Marianne, listen to me. I came west believing that the only way to survive was to need no one. I was wrong. What I have found instead is that a life without connection is not survival at all. It is merely existence." Before she could respond, hoofbeats approached. Grissom's ranch foreman spotted them and wheeled his horse around, undoubtedly to report to his employer. The discovery of their friendship brought swift consequences. Grissom moved the wedding date forward and confined Marianne to his ranch house under the guise of propriety. Meanwhile, Isaac returned home to find his newly built barn smoldering, a warning from Grissom's men. The news that spread through town the next day stunned everyone. Marianne Kincaid had been caught attempting to flee and was now locked in her room at Grissom's ranch until the hastily arranged wedding, just 3 days away. What no one expected was Isaac Powell's response. The quiet, reserved homesteader who had kept to himself since arriving rode directly to the town sheriff's office. "Sheriff Davis," he announced, "I have evidence that Bartholomew Grissom has been falsifying land deeds and cattle brands. And I believe I am not the only one with such knowledge." The accusation was both dangerous and calculated. Isaac had discovered through careful observation that several of Grissom's recent land acquisitions had involved suspicious circumstances. He had no concrete proof, but he knew someone who might. Sheriff Davis, who had long suspected Grissom's methods but lacked the political will to investigate, found himself facing a choice: continue ignoring corruption or finally take a stand. "That's a serious allegation, Powell. I would need more than your word." Send a telegram to Judge Morrison in Helena. Ask about the Blackwater Creek claim and the widow Thompson's property. I believe you will find interesting information." The sheriff, seeing something resolute in Isaac's expression, finally nodded. "I will send it. But if you are wasting my time." "I am not," Isaac assured him. The response arrived faster than anyone anticipated. By nightfall, Judge Morrison's telegram confirmed enough suspicions that Sheriff Davis could no longer look away. Grissom had indeed been forging documents and threatening landowners, including Marianne's father, whose gambling debts were largely fabrications designed to secure both his land and his daughter. The revelations shook the foundations of power in the small community. Yet even as the sheriff gathered a posse to arrest Grissom, Isaac knew Marianne remained in danger at the ranch. With the law focused on the town property where Grissom kept his records, Isaac rode alone toward the isolated ranch house where Marianne was held. The evening shadows provided cover as he approached. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, but years of frontier living had taught Isaac to move silently through wilderness. He slipped past them and found Marianne's window on the 2nd floor, a lamp burning within. When she saw his face appear at her window, Marianne nearly cried out in shock. "Isaac, what are you doing here? They will kill you if they find you," she whispered urgently. "The sheriff knows about Grissom's crimes. Your father's debts were largely falsified," he explained quickly. "But we must leave now. Grissom will not surrender easily when cornered." As if summoned by his words, Grissom's voice bellowed from downstairs. Someone had spotted an intruder. They had minutes, perhaps seconds. "I cannot climb down," Marianne said desperately, gesturing to her ankle where a crude shackle bound her to a bedpost. "He chained me after I tried to leave." The sight of the restraint ignited something primal in Isaac. Using his knife, he worked on the lock, finally breaking it open as boots thundered up the stairs. "Do you trust me?" he asked, extending his hand as the door handle began to turn. "With my life," she answered without hesitation, taking his hand. They escaped through the window onto the porch roof just as Grissom burst into the room, rage contorting his features when he found it empty. His roars followed them as Isaac helped Marianne down from the roof to where his horse waited. They rode double through the night, Isaac's arms around Marianne as she clutched the saddle horn. Behind them, lanterns bobbed like angry fireflies as Grissom's men gave pursuit. "Where are we going?" Marianne asked, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Somewhere they will not look for us," Isaac answered. He guided his horse off the main trail and up a barely visible path that wound into the foothills. After an hour of tense riding, they reached a small cabin nestled against a rock face, the hunting lodge of Sherman Wallace, the one friend Isaac had made since arriving in the territory. "We will be safe here until morning," Isaac assured her as he lit a lantern. "Sherman is guiding some eastern hunters and will not return for days." In the soft lamplight, Marianne's bruised face and chafed wrist told a story of suffering that made Isaac's heart constrict. As he tended her injuries with gentle hands, the barriers between them, already weakened by weeks of growing connection, dissolved completely. "I thought I knew what it meant to be alone," Marianne confessed as Isaac wrapped a cloth around her abraded wrist. "But I never truly understood loneliness until I was surrounded by people who saw me only as property. And I believed isolation would keep me safe," Isaac replied, his fingers lingering on her hand. "But all it did was ensure I felt nothing at all, until I met you." The confession hung between them, fragile and powerful. In that moment of vulnerability, they crossed the final distance that separated them. Their first kiss was gentle, a question and answer all at once. Dawn found them still talking, having spent the night sharing their histories, their hopes, and their newfound understanding that love was not a liability on the frontier, but the very thing that made its harshness bearable. As morning light filtered through the cabin windows, Isaac took Marianne's hands in his. "I came west believing that a man must stand alone to survive its dangers," he said. "But now I understand that it is in standing together that we truly live. Marianne Kincaid, if you will have me, I would build a life with you, not as a transaction or obligation, but as equal partners facing whatever comes together." Tears gathered in Marianne's eyes, but unlike those she had shed in recent weeks, these carried joy rather than despair. "Yes," she answered simply. 1,000 times yes. Their moment of happiness was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Isaac reached for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized Sheriff Davis's voice calling his name. The news the sheriff brought changed everything. Grissom had resisted arrest, drawing on the deputies who came for him. He would not threaten anyone again. Furthermore, the evidence in his office revealed not only his crimes against Marianne's family, but dozens of others across the territory. "Your father is a free man, Miss Kincaid," the sheriff explained. "Though he has some making amends to do, I reckon." 1 month later, as spring verdantly transformed the valley, Marianne Kincaid became Marianne Powell in a simple ceremony beside the creek that bordered Isaac's land. Her father, humbled by his failures and newly sober, gave her away with tears streaming down his weathered face. The town that had once whispered about her forced match to Grissom now celebrated a union born of genuine affection and mutual respect. The story of her escape and Grissom's downfall had transformed into something approaching legend, with each telling growing more dramatic than the last. As the guests departed and twilight painted the mountains purple, Isaac and Marianne stood on the porch of their newly completed home. "I never expected this," Marianne admitted, looking out over the land that was now truly theirs. "When my father announced my engagement to Grissom, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning." "The frontier teaches us to expect hardship," Isaac replied, his arms secure around her waist. "But perhaps its greatest lesson is that even in the harshest places, love can take root and flourish." Marianne turned in his embrace, her blue eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. "I used to believe women had no choices here, that we were merely bargaining chips in men's games." "And now?" Isaac asked, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face. "Now I believe we make our own choices, write our own stories." She smiled up at him. "And I choose this story, with you, every day." As darkness settled fully over the Montana territory, their silhouettes merged into one against the lamplight spilling from the windows of their home. Within those walls, two people who had once believed the frontier demanded isolation had discovered its most profound truth. It is in connection that we find the strength to face its challenges and the joy to make its hardships worthwhile. By summer's end, the Powell homestead had become known not only for its fine apple saplings and sturdy cattle, but for the sound of Marianne's laughter drifting across the valley. The young woman who had been forced into an unwanted engagement had found instead a partnership of equals, proving that even in the unforgiving West, love could transform survival into prosperity, and two wounded souls could heal each other.